Okay, one last rant here about Radical Russ's rants. You know, all of his divisive behavior um, doesn't lend any credibility to his, role or assumed role as leader of anything, in my opinion. A house divided cannot stand. That stands true still. But we continue to get, even after I-502 has passed, we continue to get from Normal and from Radical Russ, and, they're one and the same. They may not be united like they once were, but I have a sneaking suspicion that they're a lot closer than people would be led to believe. Radical Russ and Normal, I don't see much disconnect there. But the thing is that the movement continues to be divided and fractured, and Russ fuels that fire continuously by calling people names, comparing activists to Nazi war criminals, all this other crap. But the hypocrisy here is that he says that he will never forget somebody who has voted against him staying out of a cage or has opposed him staying out of a cage. And this and that. You'll listen to this here, except for when it's the ACLU. Now, the ACLU has opposed prohibition, or has opposed ending prohibition for 75 years by doing nothing. But then in 2010 and 2011, they openly opposed ending prohibition because Allison Holcomb gave several press conferences saying that the ACLU does not support I-1068 and the ACLU does not support I-1149. They could have just as well kept their mouths shut, but they decided to not keep their mouths shut. They gave press conferences and actively campaigned against full legalization in Washington, which means just removing the criminal penalties and not adding anything new. That's what they opposed. So when they proposed their new initiative and all these people are against it, that's similar to what they did, right? They opposed the initiative that the, people wanted for liberty and that had gotten hundreds of thousands of signatures with a shoestring budget. With like $10,000, hundreds of thousands of signatures were collected. ACLU had to spend like $5 million, to get these signatures. They had to pay people to go out and do it. Sensible Washington didn't have to pay anybody. People went and did it just because they love freedom. But they opposed it. They actively campaigned against it. But Russ never criticized them. In fact, let me take you to that first. This is interesting. This was February 22nd, 2010. ACLU of Washington will not support Washington State Legalization Initiative. This is from Russ. He knows all about it. He knows they opposed it. Allison was giving press conferences on not only I-1068, but also on I-1149. They didn't want anything to do with it. They rejected it and they campaigned against it. But is Russ holding them accountable still? Well, listen to his rant and how hypocritical he is. This is the last thing I'm going to say about Russ. Russ is irrelevant at this point. He may have had some relevance when he was fighting for freedom, but now he's just fighting for, these measures that go one step forward and three steps back, setting an awful precedence for everybody else. Russ is irrelevant now. I'm just going to debunk his bullshit, and then I'm done. That's it.
To me, and it seemed to have the most vocal group of people who smoke pot, who were also trying to keep me getting put into a cage. Now, to be fair, the complaints on I-502, at least compared to Prop 19 complainers, had some merit. Per se, DUIDs suck. They absolutely do suck. They do suck. Are they a deal breaker for legalization? Not even close. But they do suck. So,
Wait. Legalization. So you keep using that word frequently about legalization in Washington. It's not legal, Russ. First of all, it's still a Schedule 1 on a state level. It's still a Schedule 1 on a federal level. Thirdly, there's not going to be any licensed dispensers because it is a Schedule 1. So fourth, there's not going to be any legal weed because how can you procure legal weed if you cannot buy it in a legal environment? You still have to get it illegally. This is decrim at best. This is certainly not, legalization, and especially when they've added new prohibitions. They've added these new per se limits, which are horrible for freedom. And Colorado's rejected it twice in their legislature. Many other states, have dealt with it. California just threw it out here last year. We don't go for these per se limits, but Washington did. So, at one point, Washington has decriminalized an ounce, but on another hand, they've added new prohibitions and no way to procure the legal marijuana. If I-502 hadn't actually explicitly proposed a federal cooperation, and if I-502 had actually, done something like Colorado did, where Colorado made it a constitutional amendment, where it's actually a constitutional legalization or decriminalization. I don't think, Amendment 64 came a lot closer to legalization than I-502 did, but this is a false flag to call either one of them legalization. At least in Colorado, you can have home grows, you can have as much marijuana in your house from your grows as you want. You can, have an ounce on you. They've got a legal market structure being set up. So Amendment 64 is more legalization than I-502 is, but I-502 doesn't even come close. It adds new prohibitions, and it doesn't give any real rights other than you can have an ounce of weed. California did that with SB 1449 last year. They took the criminalities out of having an ounce of weed, but they didn't add new penalties. This isn't legalization, Russ. I'm going to let you continue uninterrupted, but I've got a couple more things to show. So after this clip, I'm gonna bring in some more.
In bantering with those people, there was always a part of me, and still is a part of me, that's kind of like, God, it sucks that you guys can't see the value judgment in it. But I understand why you're not making that decision. You know what I mean? I disagree with the decision, but if I understand their moral principles, I get where they're coming from. Well, the same cannot be said of the trolls in Colorado. And if you've been following my blog or any of my comments lately, you may know that I've been going rounds with a certain person named Kathleen Chipeye. But at least...
Anyway, so he's going the rounds with everybody, basically. But, the point is that, this is the commonality of what Russ does. This was the same thing with Prop 19. There was these petty insults, there was these low cuts, there was these, extreme, insult festivals on the normal stash, and that fractured and divided the movement more. That wasn't, good for healing or for progress or for, the movement to move forward. That was fracturing the movement. Let's go into this, where Russ now is accusing, or at least comparing, Steve Sarich of being like a Nazi war criminal. Now he says, oh, well, I don't really mean that, but I'm going to propose it anyway. That's such hypocrisy. But this is why Russ is irrelevant. He doesn't hold Allison Holcomb to these same standards. He doesn't hold the ACLU to these same standards. They oppose legalization. I thought that you were the bearer of, all truth and remembrance of people who have opposed you staying out of a cage. But have you all of a sudden forgot about what the ACLU did? If you look at this, you look at this on his blog post from February 22nd, 2010, he was just like, oh, well, this is kind of how it is, and that's okay. He didn't give her any criticism. He didn't give the ACLU any criticism. But for 75 years, the ACLU, almost 80 years, the ACLU has done nothing to end prohibition of cannabis. And, with all of the significant problems that prohibition has caused, for 75 years they ignored it, and now they come up with this I-502. After rejecting two initiatives that would make cannabis less of a prohibition, or actually it would just remove the prohibitions, and they rejected those. They rejected I-1068 and I-1149. But they come up with this I-502 after 75 years. You'd think a bunch of lawyers with their resources would come up with something a lot better than this. And they keep saying, well, it wouldn't have passed if we wouldn't have put the per se law in there. Bull crap. They were taking some exit poll they found in California to apply that to Washington, which I think they skewed the numbers on it anyway. But Washington isn't California. Besides that, the reason why it failed in Washington is because patients didn't like it. But if you compare that to Colorado, Colorado didn't add new DUI provisions, did they? And it passed there with a lot more liberty. You look at these people like this. This is Adam Hand. He used to be, where is he? He used to be a poster. He used to be like a publisher on our website. And here he is criticizing the ACLU for not supporting I-1068. But he, absolutely slams people like myself for opposing I-502, even though, he doesn't remember what they did with I-1068 or I-1149. He quickly, just like Russ does, forgets about it. Follow the leader here. This is the sheep movement here. Bah! That's all this is. This isn't like people being critical or you know, applying critical thinking to, you know, what they're voting in for law. This is, you know, my perspective of I-502. It's like the marijuana tax stamp, or the, you know, the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. I call it the Marijuana Tax Act of 2012. I've even got a Facebook group titled that. And I spelt marijuana with an H, just like they did back in 37. You know, that's what they did in 37. They proposed licensing and taxes and regulations, and then they never issued a license. That's what they're doing in Washington. They're just appeasing the voters because they knew how close the voters got without any money to getting marijuana legalization on the ballot. Sensible Washington got hundreds of thousands of signatures without any support of the ACLU, without very much support from Normal. Normal barely threw him a bone, didn't even do any interviews while these initiatives were running. You know, Russ interviewed people after the initiatives had failed, not during the initiative process. You know, they didn't lend any support, hardly any valuable support to Sensible Washington's initiatives. So in essence, they opposed it by not giving it support, in my opinion. The ACLU publicly opposed it. But let's hear what Russ does to degrade other activists here. He's saying that, well, I don't really mean it, but I'm going to compare Steve Sarich to a Nazi war criminal. What a hypocritical, inconsiderate, you know, insincere, you know, troublemaker. That's all this guy is. The voice of the marijuana nation. Pfft.
Down. You get me too high.
I think you're too high, buddy.
Welcome back, everyone. It's 14 after the hour, and for today's Behind the Headlines segment, I was just reminded this morning of a great scene in a Quentin Tarantino movie that's called Inglourious Bastards. And there's a character there, the Nazi hunter, who's portrayed by Brad Pitt, named Lieutenant Aldo Raine. And there's a scene where he's using his knife, his Bowie knife, to carve a swastika scar into the forehead of the Nazi, Colonel Hans Landa, that he was releasing. And his reasoning was basically that Landa had made this deal and would be able to go retire and live in relative splendor and riches. And when he did so, he was going to be able to take off his SS Nazi uniform, and no one would ever know how much he contributed to the death and destruction that was brought about by Hitler and the Nazi regime. And so that's what Aldo Raine would do, is carve a swastika in the forehead of all the Nazis that he caught, so that for the rest of their lives they would have that swastika scar, because he just could not abide by the notion of him taking off the uniform and not having to answer for all that death and destruction. So I was thinking about that today as I was reading an Esquire piece on that great prohibitionist, Steve Sarich of Canacare. Here he is pouring time and money into being the only organized opposition to marijuana legalization, proudly sporting that red No on I-502 t-shirt, and come November 7th, after I-502 wins, he'll be able to take off that t-shirt. And come December 6th, should the state license commercial marijuana take off, he could not only walk into any of the newly legal weed stores to purchase legal marijuana, he could try to become a state licensed grower, processor, or retailer to make money off I-502. Now look, I don't mean to equate opposition to 502 to the abominations of Nazi Germany. And I also...
Sure you do, or you wouldn't do it, Russ. Sure you do. Anyway, so here he is. He's doing this No on I-502 pledge. He's challenging people to take a pledge. And in February, I think it was 24th. I keep getting the date wrong, but I believe it was a broadcast he did on February 24th where he's challenging people to call in and insulting people and saying how they're cowards and they're just too afraid to call in. So I call in, and he's like, I'll give you an uninterrupted 5 minutes on the air, and you can say whatever you want about I-502. So I called in to get that uninterrupted 5 minutes, and within the first 30 seconds, he had interrupted me. Then he interrupted me again, and the 60-second mark, and the 90-second mark, and the 2.5-minute mark, and the 3-minute and 4-minute mark. I mean, he kept interrupting me. There was no uninterrupted 5 minutes. And so in that conversation, he challenged me to a bet that Ron Paul wasn't going to win. Because I said, hey, you know, if we get behind Ron Paul, he's going to legalize marijuana. And he's like, well, Ron Paul's not going to win. You want to bet on it? And, you know, anything you want to bet, let's make a wager. And so he makes all these challenges to people. He's made a challenge to me. He's made a challenge to Steve Sarich. So I offered him an opportunity to make $500 for a charity of his choice. And I said, hey, if in 2013 Washington actually implements legal dispensaries, then I will donate $500 to a charity of your choice. If they do not, like I predict, then you've got to donate $500 to the Libertarian Party. I'm not asking him to line my pockets. I just want to see liberty progress. I want to see legalization happen. I want to see, lots of things in the liberty movement happen, for our civil rights and for our freedom. So I'm not asking him to benefit me personally. I'm asking him to benefit freedom. And he turned me down. I mean, that's a win-win. I mean, if I gave $500 to a charity of his choice, I think he's a nonprofit. I think he's running a nonprofit. He could easily ask me to donate to him. That's fine. I'd do that. Or Normal, for that matter, even though I despise Normal at this point. I would do that. That's fine. But he turned it down. So I know he's not confident about all this stuff he was saying before I-502. He doesn't really believe that there's going to be legal dispensaries, even though he said he did. And he said there was definitely going to be legal dispensaries if we vote on I-502 several times. In different words, but he said that over and over and over and over, promoted it, just like he did with, the dispensaries in SB 5073 back in 2011. I told him there's no way that they're going to be legal dispensaries, and that SB 5073 is negative for patients' rights because it screwed up the doctor and patient relationship in Section 301, and it screwed up the provider and patient relationship in Section 404, removing rights and decreasing the amount of protection that patients had in Washington. And in the end, there was no dispensaries, and he was promoting that the same way, saying, oh, if we don't vote for this, we're not going to get legal dispensaries, and we're not going to get this and that, and it's going to be he was quoted as saying, this is going to be the best thing to happen to Washington patients ever, and all that. In the end, more rights were repealed, and there was no dispensaries. I predict the same thing to happen with this, with the I-502. With the federal cooperation that's written into I-502 and the fact that it's still a Schedule I drug on a state and federal level, there's not going to be legal dispensaries. They're not going to issue licenses. This is just the Marijuana Tax Act of 2012. That's all this is. Russ can call it whatever he wants. It's certainly not legalization if it's still a Schedule I, and it's certainly not going to have legal dispensaries because of that. He doesn't believe in it, or he would have bet me. He's a betting man. He's the one that originally challenged me to a bet just, 8 months ago. Or 7 months ago, he challenged me to a bet. So I know he's a betting man, but he's not going to bet me on this because he knows he's wrong. Russ is irrelevant. In this movement, Russ is irrelevant. So let's just listen to his pledge, because he's really handy with these pledges, and I'd like to hear the rest so everybody can document this for their own reference when they're holding him to the fire like he likes to hold other activists to the fire. Unless they're Allison Holcomb, of course.
So don't think it's a good policy to carve swastikas into people's foreheads for later identification. However, I do think that all the people who smoke pot and have been so vocal about defeating I-502 owe the rest of us healthy pot smokers a pledge to put their money where their mouth is.
Hey, that's all I'm asking you to do, buddy. You're going to put your money where your mouth is? Well, I guess you're not, because you already rejected it.
So to Steve Sarich, Steve Elliott, Philip Doughty, Doug Hyatt, Jeff Steinborn, Kerry Boyder, Anthony Martinelli, and all the various commenters who show up on every blog piece about I-502 to spew their prohibition-supporting rhetoric.
Like you. I mean, supporting I-502 is supporting prohibition, right? Per se laws is a new prohibition. And Russ, you supported that, you asshole. Tell me that all these other people are supporting prohibition because they rejected I-502. They were rejecting prohibition because there's prohibition written into I-502. Don't you get that? These are the same people you're degrading right now that were fighting for full legalization back in 2010 and 2011 with Sensible Washington. And you don't even recognize the people who opposed that. You don't even recognize that Allison Holcomb fought bitterly against that, and the ACLU. You forget so quickly. But here you're talking about how you're going to remember these people and you're going to, brand them so that everybody recognizes who they are. Why don't you brand Allison Holcomb? You're a hypocrite, Russ.
I call on all of them to take the no on I-502 pledge. So if you're listening to me now and you're going to vote against legalization,
legalization, you keep saying that. Dude, I have it better in California with SB 1449. Russ, here's the thing. With SB 1449, it took the criminal penalties away from cannabis possession of an ounce. So it's not a crime now to possess an ounce in California. You don't go to jail, you don't get arrested, you don't have a permanent record here for possessing an ounce. But what's good about it is that you don't get new penalties out of it. There's no new prohibitions introduced with SB 1449, and we still have a semi-legal ounce. I mean, in Washington, it's more legal to possess an ounce than it is in California, but cops aren't enforcing it here because there's only a $100 fine if you get caught with an ounce here. It's not worth the cops' time to, arrest you or to, give you a ticket, take your pot, process it, send you through the court system, make you pay a fine, all that for $100. They're not arresting people here for that. So I have it better in California because I didn't get any new penalties out of the law that decriminalized cannabis here. In Washington, it's still illegal to pass a joint. It's still illegal to have a home grow. It's still illegal to, give a nug to your friend. It's illegal to drive if you have over 5 nanograms in your system if you're over 21. It's illegal to have any marijuana in your system if you're under 21. And impairment isn't the issue anymore. In court, you can't even defend yourself saying, hey, I wasn't impaired. I passed the field sobriety test. I wasn't impaired, obviously, because I wouldn't have been able to pass that sobriety test if I was. Now you don't get that defense in court. Now it's, hey, you're over 5 nanograms. The judge won't even hear your excuse that you weren't impaired because impairment isn't the law anymore. It's a per se law. So if you have a certain level in your system, you are now guilty. And that's the end of the story. There's no defense about impairment anymore. That's out the window. So, these people that you're calling out saying, well, they were against legalization. They weren't against legalization, buddy. They've been fighting for a long time, probably longer than you have, for legalization. And they were opposed by your buddies in the ACLU when they were trying to get legalization going. But they weren't opposing the good things in I-502. They were opposing all the horrible things in I-502. And that's all. So you're sending out a false flag here. You're being dishonest here, Russ. You're fucking lying. And I don't know how to put it any more polite than that because that's what you're doing here, and I don't appreciate it.
Vote the same way as the drug czar. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. Whereas the passage of Initiative 502 in Washington State to legalize an ounce of marijuana and institute state-licensed commercial marijuana operations is, quote, bad law and will not pass. Whereas the passage of I-502 will, quote, throw patients under the bus. And whereas the passage of I-502 is, quote, not true legalization. I, state your name, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will take no profit from Initiative 502 when it passes on November 6, 2012. I will never enter a Washington State licensed recreational marijuana store. I will never become a state licensed grower, processor, or retailer of recreational marijuana. I will never write a review for a newspaper for a Washington State licensed recreational marijuana store. I will never smoke any marijuana that came from a Washington State licensed grower, processor, or retailer. And if I am ever in an encounter with law enforcement and I have less than an ounce of marijuana in my possession, I will donate what would have been the misdemeanor fine to charity, and what would have been the 24-hour mandatory minimum jail stay I will perform as hours of community service. Now, to be fair, I'm sure they'll want some sort of return pledge from us to cover all that devastation that's going.
Well, of course we want a return pledge. I mean, but you won't give it to me. I mean, I can read it to you. Would you like me to give you that again? Because I do want you to, fulfill your obligation following through with your, half-assed promises about this so-called legalization. You kept telling people, hey, if we vote for this, we're going to get, legal stores. We're going to get, licensed distributor system. We're going to get this and that. And, if you still believe that after it's passed, all I'm asking you, Russ, is to put your money where your mouth is, like you're asking everybody else. If you weren't asking everybody else, I wouldn't ask you. I wouldn't ask you to do this at all. But you've been pestering people to bet you and to take pledges and to all this other stuff. So I wrote, Russ Belville, I realize you are a betting man. I know you like to challenge other activists to bets, oaths, and promises, like recently with Steve Sarich. I would be interested in a double or nothing wager about legal cannabis stores opening in Washington, licensed by the Liquor Control Board. I've donated to NORML many times, supported your endeavors with what little I could, but I've sworn to not donate any more based on the childish insults dealt during the last couple of cannabis legalization campaigns. I figure if you are right about there being legal dispensaries in Washington come 2013, then you would deserve a reward for accurately reading the policy and interpreting the intentions of the state the courts and the feds. So how about a small $250 bet? If you win, legal stores actually arrive in Washington come 2013, December, right? Then I donate to the charity of your choice $500. If I win, you donate $500 to the Libertarian Party. Sounds like a good deal to me. So are you willing to put your money where your mouth is? I'll make a video. And he said no here. He replied. He said, no, that's a stupid bet. How is it a stupid bet? It's a win-win. You know, a charity or a nonprofit or a political organization gets funding, and you get to do your betting like you've been trying to do. You've been trying to get me to bet you. You've been trying to get other people to take your oaths and your pledges. So, you know, why would you reject this? Since first of all, no. I mean, that's just the hypocrisy here of Russ Belville. I can't listen to you anymore. This is the end of the road for me, Russ. I'm turning you off. I've only listened to about 8 or 9 of your shows in the last year because it's just so hard to listen to you. All you do is fight with people back and forth and divide the movement. You know, you're only getting a couple hundred hits on your videos. Some of them that have been on your blog for months have gotten like 24 hits. I mean, for somebody who does this full time, people have stopped listening to you, buddy. You've got 585 videos or something like that. And let me just see how many videos you've got. And you've only got like oh, there was somewhere here where it showed how many videos Russ has. But he's been online here since October 3rd, 2006. He's only got 113,000 video views. And like if you look at these, you know, you look at 73 hits, you know, 20 hits, 15, 16, 26, 106. I mean, this is somebody who's doing this full time, you know, who was drawing a paycheck, and you know, he's not even getting as many hits as I do doing this part time in my spare time. I mean, you can hear all my kids, and I got all this craziness going on all the time. I got 3 kids, 3 businesses, a full-time job, a 91-year-old grandma to take care of. Although my wife gets the credit for most of that, she's really good at it. But you know, I don't have the time that Russ does, you know, to sit here and play around and insult people, and, you know, and do what he does. But yet I'm still getting a lot more hits than him. I've only been online only online with this account since 2008, 2 years less than he has, and I've got less videos than he has. I only have 219 videos. He has like 585 videos, and I've got 605,000 video views and 699 subscribers. I mean, obviously, Russ, what you're saying isn't being accepted by most and isn't being distributed around, and people aren't really paying attention to what you're saying. It's because you're really not paying attention to your job, and you're just fighting with people. So I can't back that up anymore. I've donated to you, and I've donated to Normal several times, but I'm just done, man. If you can't try to heal and make this a better situation, then what's the point? You know, you give all this praise and all this credit to the ACLU, who opposed prohibition for 75, or who opposed ending prohibition for 75 years, and who literally opposed in public press conferences legalization in Washington during 2 initiatives. They rejected it. And you're giving all this flack to the activists and the patients and the people who really care about cannabis, and you're giving all this praise and glory to the lawyers who don't even use cannabis, who make money off of prohibition when the client comes to them and says, hey, I just got arrested for weed or for DUID, please take my money and defend me in court. You know, those are the people you're defending, Russ, and the politicians and the people who are screwing us over. And the bad law reform, like these new DUID limits and the per se limits and stuff. You're the one that's going backwards here. You keep talking about legalization as if though Washington's legalized. Why don't you just call it what it really is? It's decriminalization with an added new prohibition. That's what Washington's law in I-502 is. That's what the results are. Is that it's a narrow legal exception, basically decriminalization, with a new prohibition against driving. Well, several different clauses to that too, depending on your age, and no chance of any legal market. And you won't even bet on it. I'm just done. That's the last thing I got to say. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I got to go hang out, mingle with my family. I'm just so excited to have my computer back. I've been having to make radio podcasts with my phone because we've just moved and all my stuff was packed up, and now I finally got my computer back. So I'm just going into the history here that I've been meaning to catch up on and doing some videos. Also, I wanted to tell you about the Marijuana Tax Act of 2012 group that I've got on Facebook here, and I'm just going to keep updating this. Yeah, if you go here, just check this out on Facebook if you're interested in the progress or at least in the situation that's going on in Washington. I'm glad I got the heck out of there. And I'm glad California passed SB 1449. I'm also very proud of Colorado and what they did. That was amazing. Thanks for your time. Have a good day. Peace out.